Hey there, it's Julie Hutchison here from Think, Be, Do Leadership. And the title of today's live is, Didn't I Just Say That? And I was inspired by a lady who was saying, and it resonated with me, about why women are so frustrated at work sometimes, because as a woman, you know, when you've experienced it, you've probably done this, where you've said something in a meeting or in a group of people, and maybe it didn't get heard, maybe it didn't get responded to. It was as if you never said it, and then suddenly a guy says something, they say the same thing, and everybody goes, oh yeah, brilliant idea. And you're like, didn't I just say that? Have you ever experienced that? If you're a woman and you haven't experienced that, then I salute you, really, because it's a pretty normal thing for women to have to go through at times, and it's really annoying. And so I thought, well, I'm going to talk about it, and I'd love, if you're listening to this, man or woman, whether you have noticed this in meetings or in groups, or whether you've experienced it, or maybe I'm wrong and maybe you're a man and you've experienced it too, and you're not listened to. But it's so annoying because to me, women in and I talk about tech organization, but in technical roles, have got some really good skills and really good perspectives that are going to help make a more rounded organization. I'm not saying women are better than men or men are better than women. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you put people in a room, that's what I want to talk about. If you put people in a room who are not focused on whether they're women or they're men, what you actually get is a respect and collaboration and different perspectives that make the place more creative, more productive, more collaborative. And so it drives me insane, and I think it drives a lot of women insane when we experience, and it's not from all men, I totally understand that, but when we experience when we are either mansplained to us, or whether we're ignored when we say something, or whether somebody, takes their idea and then makes it out to be their own, which is another thing that's really annoying, because it's a waste of amazing talent, amazing perspectives, and 50% of your workforce. So why would we do that? Why would that happen? And it happens because maybe, well, you tell me if you've got an opinion, please let me know and pop it in the comments. But I think it happens because for many businesses, even though we think we've got over all of this, for many businesses, it's the way it's always been. It's always been that the men have the say. And if you are listening to this and you think, how dare she say that? That's just not true. Then I have a number of different examples. I'm not going to name them on the live, but if you want to talk about that, then let's talk, because it is still happening. I was talking to a CTO in a very big organization, a worldwide organization, who was telling me that she still has this experience in their senior leadership team meetings, and HR still can't do anything about it because they don't listen to them either. And so it does still happen, believe you me. And it's such a shame. Maybe you just couldn't get a word in edgeways at all. I don't know. But let's hear from you if you think that's the case. And if you're a man, I want to hear from you to tell me, what are you doing in your organization to change this? Because I'm not saying that all men are doing this. And actually, I think there's a lot of men out there. I was talking to a wonderful guy the other day who was telling me how frustrated he was with this, and how this does not encourage more women and more diversity to come into organizations, particularly into tech. And so it's sort of a false economy to not include people, to not utilize this amazing talent. Women are and not admittedly, imagine two circles, a Venn diagram where these are the men and these are the women and here's everything in between. And there's an overlap, of course. But what we know is that women do have a very, very useful perspective, a very creative perspective. They're often good at soft skills, more so than the predominance of the men in tech, let's say. They're an untapped talent in that way. And so why would we not use them? We are missing out. And so we need to encourage more women to have a voice. We need to be able to encourage more women into tech. And this isn't helping if this still happens. And it does. Women's opinion and contribution shouldn't be lost in your organization. And because the more you foster diversity, and you foster a real respect for whoever that person is, whether they're, whatever color they are, whatever religion they are, whether they're men or women, or whatever. It doesn't matter. We have to respect that human. And once we do that, we get over ourselves and we just listen to what people have got to say, then we are going to be a better business for it. And let's just think about what do women, because I'm talking about women particularly today, but what do women need to do to be able to have a better voice, or a bigger voice, and to not experience this? And I think there's 4 things. I think, first of all, I think there's 5 things. The very first thing is that men and women need to get together and decide that enough is enough. I left university in 1993, I think it was. And this was happening. I was in, I did a manufacturing engineering degree with like 100 guys and a couple of girls. And it was happening then. That's a long time ago. It shouldn't be happening now, because we should have moved on. And I think we have a bit, but we haven't completely. So I think that men and women should get together and decide in your organization that enough is enough, and that culturally and behaviorally we're not going to stand for that shite anymore. And that somebody and someone and the senior leadership team, a number of whoever, everybody should be able to say outright, we're not accepting this. And when we say we're not accepting it, is that we mean it and we live by that value. Okay. And we've all seen it where everybody pays lip service to oh yes, we're a diverse organization, and we want women, and we want people of color, and we want all of this, and then they just pay lip service and it never happens. What I mean is that the senior leaders should stand up and have the guts to put their money where their mouth is and not allow this to happen. And that means challenging it, and it means stopping it and nipping it in the bud in every meeting, in every conversation, in every way. Whenever we see it, we need to stop it from happening. And that takes guts. I totally agree. But you imagine that if we see a consequence for this kind of behavior and bias, then if we see a consequence, we're going to start to learn that it's not acceptable. It's a bit like smoking. You know how years ago, do you remember when you went on an airplane, and if everybody's this old, maybe you're not this old, but that's a good example, because on an airplane, you used to be able to smoke. I mean, can you imagine a tube in the air, and you're allowed to smoke on it? And it was okay, because if you were up the front, you were in the no smoking section, and if you were in the back, you were in the smoking section. But it's one big tube, and people could still smoke, and they thought that was okay. I think that's a little bit dangerous, a little bit obnoxious, very unhealthy, and all of those things. And nowadays you look back on that and you think, wow, why would anybody do that? Yeah, you don't smoke in restaurants, you don't smoke in public buildings. People don't do that anymore, and people look upon that and say, ugh, who would do that? Yeah, it's seen as something that nobody would want to do. And I think that's how this should be. I think that's how we change this culture, is that we all sign up to that fact of like, this is not acceptable, and we're going to put consequence in place. We're not just going to let I don't know, Bob in the corner keep being ridiculously against having a woman working with him, and not say anything just because that's just the way Bob is, or whatever. We won't want to accept any of this stuff. So that's the first point. And I think if we do that, my God, that would make massive changes if we all just stood by what we say we believe. Yeah. But then I also think that we need more allies. Women need to find allies that help them with that. Men and women, and stick together to be able to challenge this and work together to talk about this, to bring it up in conversation. And if it happens to somebody, a woman in a meeting, for example, then the other person is their ally, and they say, hey, no. And they don't say, oh, don't be horrible to Betty or whatever it might be, but they just, by demonstration of their behavior, show that that's not acceptable. Okay, we don't want to patronize women, but we just need other people to men and women to step up and not watch that happen. Okay, that's point number two, sorry. Then we need to work on ourselves as women, because you know what? We need to be the best that we can be. We're not saying that we want to be, just allowed in just because, and there's a phrase, isn't it? Allowed in. That's a whole nother conversation. But we're not saying that we want to be there just because we want to be there, because we're good at what we do. And so we need to be constantly developing ourselves. It's the same as men need to be. But we all need to look at what part do we need to work on ourselves. And then I think going back to that challenging is not to allow that just to pervade through and not say anything. I think that's really, really, really important, that we learn how to challenge that without just whining and whinging or being seen as whining and whinging, but we say it in our power. We say it in a way makes people sit up and listen, and we need support for that, and we need to be able to have people around us, whether that's a coach or a mentor or a supportive group environment, whatever it might be. But we need that support, because do you know what, that takes resilience, and it's hard to do when you're still seeing it 30 years after you thought that it was going to be finished, when you get fresh out of university or whatever it might be. So I want you to think about how in your organization, if you're a man or a woman, but how in your organization, if you're in a leadership position, how can you actually bring this agenda forward and say, do you know what, in our organization, we're not going to suffer this. We are not going to accept it. And then the consequence for that is that you stand by what you say, and you deal with people who do not behave in a diverse way. And I think that's what we need to do. We need it to be like that smoking aeroplane. Who on earth would do that? Well, who on earth would behave like this? So that's my thought for the day. I'll leave you with that one. And thank you very much for listening. And if you have any comments, I would be really happy to hear them. Take care.